Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm doing my reading wrap up for the month of May. The first book that I read was The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. I gave this one 4 stars. It was good fun. Basically, the Invisible Library series is the kind of book that is really good fun whilst you're reading it, but then you stop and think about the plot and you go, sorry, what now? Like, what actually happened there? It tells the story of a world where there are multiple universes, and outside of these multiple universes exists the library, which exists to collect different instances of famous work across all of these multiverses. So there, for example, would be potentially like a copy of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, and certain fairy tales might be missing in certain different multiverses, and this has implications about that world, and it is the job of the library to collect these books, both for themselves but also because of ramifications of what it means for that world. Our main character, whose name I've forgotten, gets given a fairly dangerous mission in what she thinks to be a total rookie, and it's just them kind of exploring that world and trying to solve their mission, and all these like underlying potential conspiracy issues going on. There's like a big bad. It's all generally good fun. At one point an event gets attacked by crocodiles. Like, it's ridiculous and quirky and really entertaining. It's not good quality plot, but it is fast-paced plot. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, if I know that that's what it is going in, and I was kind of expecting from this sort of paranormal fantasy magical realism kind of vibe, I'm down, I'm cool, everything's all good. But I'm going to continue with the series. I think there are like 5 books in total. I don't know if it's finished or not, but it was good fun. Then I read the only physical book that I read in the month of May, and that was The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot by Blaine Harden. You'll have already seen me talk about this in my video, which is where I finally finished my partner's TBR that he gave me. This was one of the books that Andy gave me way back in February. It is non-fiction, and it is looking at 2 major stories or narratives running parallel. One of them being about the North Korean government and dictatorship, and the other one being about a young pilot in North Korea who has an opportunity to defect and take a North Korean plane to an American airbase. It spans both this young pilot's life going back from childhood and also what was going on in the government at the time. So really wonderful writing style, lovely natural flow to it, very easygoing non-fiction, especially given the topic matter. Broke down a lot of the relationships between North Korea and China and Russia in really interesting ways. Looked at like the interactions with America. The whole stuff to do with the pilot, absolutely fascinating. All entirely true, all entirely amazing, totally wicked. I would really heavily recommend it. Great book. So the book that we had for the bibliotherapy sessions this month was the Book of M. I will link both the channels of the other 2 people who are reading along on my buddy read with me down below. The Book of M is by Peng Shepherd, and I gave this one 5 stars. Like, phenomenal book, phenomenal read, absolute definite favourite of the month, favourite of the year I would predict, potentially even making it into like an all-time favourites list. Just absolutely fantastic. The Book of M was kind of making a lot of waves maybe around this time last year. I think it kind of was fairly popular and then sort of died, the hype died down a little bit. It's basically a kind of dystopian future situation, but with a bit of magical realism thrown in as well. And basically it's in a world where people's shadows start to disappear, but when your shadow disappears, your memories disappear. But when your memories disappear, the way that you remembered the world being, as opposed to the way it actually is, starts to be reflected in the real world. So your thoughts will affect the world. So it could be little things like, I could remember that my partner was wearing a blue shirt this morning and he was actually wearing green, and if I misremember that and I don't have a shadow, then he will suddenly be wearing a blue shirt. Obviously this has much bigger implications when people start to forget really major things like entire people existing, certain words for things, how to eat. It goes really far. The book itself follows a whole host of characters and plays around with some really interesting concepts with the idea of personal identity and memory and how we connect the two, and the human body and the brain, and how important it is that the two are connected, and the idea of like the body being a vessel for the brain. It plays around with a lot of ideas that was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about when I was doing my philosophy degree, and about like philosophy of mind and continuation of personhood and all sorts of funky concepts like that. There's a bunch of really cool like sequences in it as well, which was really great fun. A bunch of like kind of fight scenes which were awesome, and I thought it tied itself together in a fantastic way. Thought the way that the magic system was built in was so clever. Like normally I get really annoyed when magic systems aren't fully explained and they can kind of do whatever they want, but the personal cost of forgetting to be able to use the magic was something that I was really happy with how it worked, because it meant that each character, like there was actually like a payoff for doing it. It wasn't just this catch-all phrase which could just be used to get out of any kind of plot point or plot corner or anything like that. I hope that made sense. I'm going to be doing a longer video talking about this one with all the questions for the bibliotherapy sessions. I don't quite know when it's going to be out, but I've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of opinions about this book. I might even do another separate kind of thought piece or review about it. I thought it was just really cool in so many different ways. Then I read Bluff by Michael Cardos, and this was a completely different style of book, like completely going off from left field, very different to what I normally read. It was contemporary, and if you've been around on this channel for a while, you know that I tend not to read contemporaries. Nearly everything I read has got a speculative or magical kind of twist to it. So this tells the story of a young woman who is a magician. She had an opportunity to make it big. She kind of choked. There was a lot of personal issues going on there. Her big thing is close-up magic, and she is trying to do a piece on card cheat, people who cheat in poker. And on the way she gets kind of embroiled in this big con that this other woman is trying to pull off, and it's about their story. The amount of information about both kind of the world of magic and close-up magic and also the world of poker was really, really cool. There are twists in this that, like, oh my god. So as I was reading it, I was like, this is good fun, I'm having a good time, you know, this is maybe like 3.5, 4 stars, everything's all good, but I'm not like blown away by it. And then I vividly remember I was on the plane because I was coming back from Portugal with Andy, and we'd been away for a long weekend, and I was on the plane and I was like, oh my god, what did I just read? And I absolutely blitzed the book, and I was like just about to put it down and have a nap because I was feeling quite tired, and then this twist happened and I was like, I'm not stopping reading, I have to finish this book right now. And because of that twist, this book went from like 3.5 to 5 stars. I was like, I love it so much, this is fantastic, I love what you've done, I love the commitment. Then things take a bit of a nosedive to really the only like bad book of the month, and that was Charming by Jane Washington. So this is, in theory, or at least the back and the cover implied, a Cinderella retelling where it's looking at a kind of fae or magic based world that exists outside of stories and fairy tales, and their job is to go into fairy tales and make sure certain fairy tales keep repeating in the same way in each generation, because there's something to do with that holds like the framework of magic in our world together. However, with that said, we got almost nothing of the actual Cinderella retelling concept, because overlaid over the top of this was actually a much bigger like magic political plot going on about the world outside the fairy tales. So I kind of felt a bit misled off the bat. You add to that the fact that Jane Washington cannot write a sex scene to save her life, and not only can she not write sex scenes, there were many instances in this book which were like straight up not okay, like just not okay. I actually have a note saved on my e-reader, which I never do, like I'm never bothered by saving notes or making notes as I go, but there's definitely a bit in it where the main character is trying to convince our Cinderella type character, who it turns out is this like thieving sort of peasant type girl, that she needs to break into the palace to sleep with the prince, and this is like how our main fairy character is gonna like fix the Cinderella myth fairy tale for her. But she's like, yeah, you need to go in there and make love to the prince. And I'm sorry, like, sorry what? It's R-A-P dash make love. I'm sorry, what were you gonna write? What are we talking about? And she convinces this Cinderella type character that the prince, even though he's like a huge perv in like all of his public outings and everything, is actually secretly a virgin, is ashamed of the fact that he's a virgin, and needs someone to forcibly take him so that he can lose his virginity and get over the shame so that he can then marry and take over the kingdom. I'm sorry, what did I just read? Like, Jane Washington, that's not okay. And this book really is like the literary equivalent to Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines. Like, because you might be wondering, like, why the hell did I keep reading after this scene? And honestly, when you're in the book, like, you almost don't even notice these kind of scenes, which is terrifying, because everything's like so light-hearted and jolly and upbeat. Oh, isn't it fun? And we're doing fairy tales. And you do feel like you're bobbing along to Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines. You're like, yeah, this is like got a really catchy tune, man. And then you pause and you think about what it's saying. You go, no, that's not okay. No, I'm now fundamentally disagreeing with the underlying message of this particular piece of artwork. And it was just incredible. And I think one of the major reasons why I almost didn't notice some of these really, like, genuinely, like, sexual assault scenes in this book that were just brushed over like they weren't a thing and they were just funny little plot points, was because the sex scenes that were consensual were so badly written that I almost didn't notice when the badly written sex scene was non-consensual. Like, the sex scenes became, and any reference to sex in general, of which there were many, became just white noise because they were so badly handled. And if you could, like, the political intrigue, magical world subplot was really cool. And if you could just have stripped all of this, like, both consensual and non-consensual, and the fact that I have to state that about a book is really, really depressing. But, like, if you could have stripped both of them out of this and just had it as this, like, political intrigue overlaid with magic, overlaid with like fairy tale retelling, I would have been on board. Like, part of me is tempted to continue with the series because I am interested in the world, but another bigger part of me is like, do not reward this woman for writing terrible sex scenes and also writing sexual assault into her book. Like, no. So yeah, so if anybody else has read anything by Jane Washington and has any, like, thoughts on this, do let me know. I keep meaning to look up reviews about this and kind of see whether I was the only one who picked up on this, because honest to God, I think the first few scenes just, like, washed over my head. I didn't notice because I was just white noising everything to do with sex in that book. Venerate the Night Tiger by Yang Chu. And this one I gave about 4 stars to. It took me a real long time to get into it, but once I was kind of settled in it, I was having a really good time. This is a Malaysian story which has got a lot of magical realism. It's focused on Malaysian folklore, and it's to do with people who can turn themselves into tigers and like a were-tiger vibe. It's also got overlaid in that a lot of things to do with Malaysian folklore and religion and mythology based on death and, like, your body being whole, and if your body isn't whole then you will come back and, like, walk the earth. And there also being a window of time where the body can be remade. It had a bunch of sort of conspiracy stuff going on in that as well. It was kind of at its heart really like a mystery, slight thriller-esque vibe, but with all this kind of magic-y stuff over the top. I thought it was really interesting and really cool. I don't know why it took me so long to sink into it. I think because I was also reading alongside with this this charming book, and I was kind of like, the two were so different in style. I was really grappling with like bouncing back between the two of them. But I had a really good time with it. I thought that there were, like, one too many twists in the book, really. I thought it was kind of trying a little bit too hard at the end, and that was probably why it didn't get us, why it got like a 4 rather than a 5-star from me. Having said that, my rating system is so, like, whimsical and arbitrary. I wouldn't really worry about when I say 4 or 5 stars. It was a good read. Also, the Malaysian culture, when it comes to, like, the role of women in their culture and what the female character could and couldn't do without, like, having a guide with her or, like, a male companion, and, like, what was and wasn't acceptable, I'm sure must ring true to that culture. But I'm getting really sick of reading books where women can't do shit because they are women. And I think that's just me generally being grumpy at the world and grumpy at that whole side of things. So whilst it is always good to read books from other cultures, and especially if you've got books where other cultures where the gender roles haven't been looked at as much, or that it's potentially more restricted for women, and again, historical fiction and looking at that kind of thing can be really good. I think personally this year I've just read a fair number where that's been an issue, and I'm just kind of over it. Like, yeah, that's probably all that's worth really saying there. And then the final book that I read, and this one was actually what I listened to, This was my audiobook for the month, and that was Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, narrated by Rob Ingalls, I think. This one, like, I've been meaning to get around to Lord of the Rings for a while. I think it was mentioned on my Classics TBR that I was going to attempt to get to at least one of them. I actually finished Lord of the Rings book 2 today, because it's like, I think it's like into May, no, into June even at time of filming. Normally I'm much quicker at getting my wrap-ups out. This is like a slow month for me, and I've enjoyed book 2 way more than book 1, spoiler alert. So I'm going to be a little bit critical of book 1, but know that I'm not critical of the trilogy as a whole. It's just book 1, man, like, oh my god, book 1, like, when they are not singing, walking or monologuing, it is really, really good. However, the singing, walking and monologuing takes up easily 75% of this book. Like, we had so many songs. Why was there a bath time song? What the hell was that? What, just so many songs. The prologue, oh my god, just the amount of information about hobbits, man. And then Bilbo's party, where we get to know about all of his relatives, and it takes freaking ages for anything interesting to happen. And I think that the movies have done such a better job of passing out the amount of information we get in book 1 throughout the rest of kind of the trilogy. There are entire chunks of information which, like, I just didn't need right there. And, like, I'm just going to assume that everybody who's watching has experienced Lord of the Rings in some format, because it's been out for ages, so get on that if you haven't. So spoilers galore right now, but like the whole thing about Gollum's back history, actually finding that out either at the beginning of movie 2 or maybe even the beginning of movie 3 in the movies is really good, because you've got to know this, like, creepy, horrible creature that you have no sympathy for, and then you see him, like, the effect that the ring has had on him, and it helps to instill sympathy exactly when the story needs sympathy. And I think that that's a really clever thing that Peter Jackson did. The book just giving you, like, information dump of the biography of Gollum before you even really get to see him on the page properly in the flesh, I think doesn't work, because actually, you know, we're supposed to be building some sympathy for this character a bit later in book 2, and I'm assuming in book 3, but actually I've forgotten all these things that you've said, so it's quite hard for me to feel that way. The Council of Elrond, man, oh damn, that went on for ages. Like, oh. And it's the kind of thing that if Lord of the Rings was not so big and so well known in our pop culture, and if it weren't for the judicial listening of several different podcasts about Lord of the Rings, there is no way I would have continued with book 1. Like, book 1 was a freaking slog. Tom Bombadil, like, Tom Bombadil. That's all I need to say on that. If you are interested in reading Lord of the Rings and you don't know whether you actually want to bother with it or not, what I would say is my absolute favourite podcast in the world, the Overdue Podcast guys. They are absolutely amazing. They have a really, really fantastic series, like mini-series almost, where they do The Hobbit and then the 3 Lord of the Rings books. And one of the guys, Craig, his sister comes on board for The Hobbit and the book 1, and she is so funny, and they just, like, articulate so many of the frustrations I have, but then can talk about the really important things about it. And I actually find it really helpful to know what I'm going to find frustrating about a book before I go into it, so I have a sense of, like, how long is this frustrating thing going to last for, which I know some people find really weird. Andy finds it so strange that I like to listen to podcasts about books before I read said book, but especially when it's like a classic and I'm trying to work out if I actually want to read it or not. But yeah, so book 1 is down, it's done, I've done it, I've experienced it. We give it 3 stars, purely for what it represents in the fantasy canon of literature. Book 2, fantastic, absolute riot. Not got to book 3 yet. Book 2 is technically in my June wrap up. I will talk about it more at the end of this month. So that's it from me. Really long wrap up as always. My wrap up seems to equal the same length of time regardless of how many books I've read in a month or not. Also, this might be my 100th video if this one goes out what I'm expecting it to. So that's exciting. 100 videos. I was not expecting to hit that number so soon. Being unemployed for a month really gives you plenty of time to film at the beginning of the year, doesn't it? Also, just like, I'm surprised I've stuck with this for so long, so I'm really pleased with that, and I'm really psyched in general that I've done that. So thank you very much for everybody who's been watching. If you've been here from the beginning, if this is the first video you've seen of mine, if you ever make it to the end of these things, thank you so much. I've had such a good time already, and I can't wait for the next 100 videos. Yeah, it's all been awesome. So have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.